In this class, candidates are going to be looking at the essay type question, and we are going to use May-June 2021 past paper to aid us in doing the essay type question. Section C of the past paper, or expected for the papers that you'll be writing the trial as well as the final, it is an essay type question. An essay type question is on question number 5 and question number 6. However, our main focus in this video will be mainly on question number 5, which is microeconomics. So what are you expected to do when you are faced with section C of your paper 1 in the trial as well as the final is that you are expected to answer any one of the two questions, right? So you need to select the part of the question that you feel more comfortable with and then stick on that question. Do not answer the two questions, however, focus on one question. Again, candidates, do not waste your time responding on what you have not been asked because the markers will only mark one question, and that will be the question that you will start with. Now, let us see what we have in question 5. Question 5 is a macroeconomics question, and it's made up of two parts. The first one is the main part, and the second part, it is the additional part. In the main part, you need to discuss in detail the objective of the public sector. So why do we have public sector in SA economy? What is the objective of having the public sector in the economy, in SA economy? And the second part, which is additional part, how will the public sector failure negatively influence economic stability in South Africa? So this question or this additional part, it is linked to the main part. So you need now to state how will this sector negatively influence economic stability in South Africa. So this is the essay type question. So you're expected to have an introduction, the main body, and the main body will be broken down into two, the main part as well as the additional part. And then lastly, you have your final part, which is conclusion. If you do not know what you're expected to do in the introduction, the main body, as well as the conclusion, please look out for my video where I take candidates throughout how to respond to the essay type question, and that is broken down into different part, which is introduction, the body, as well as the conclusion. Now, without wasting time, let us see how then will approach this question or how candidates is expected to approach macroeconomics question. And now let us move to the next part. So the next part will have what we call introduction. So what are you doing in the introduction? In the introduction, you are just defining what you are going to talk about in the body. So you're basically attracting the user to understand that you understand what are you going to be talking about in your body. In the introduction, the government respond to market failure by establishing and maintaining state-owned enterprises to provide public goods and services. So what are you saying? You are showing the market that you understand what is the government, which is public sector, is doing, right? So they are there to establish and maintain the services that is provided to the public by the state-owned entities. For example, let's talk about ESCOM. You know that ESCOM is providing the services, which is electricity. So what the government is doing in order to ensure that there is no market failure, they strive to make sure that we do not have load shedding. So government respond to market failure by establishing and maintaining state-owned enterprises to provide public goods and services. Now let's look at what we have then in the body, and we'll start with the main part. Once we are done with the main part, then we will look at the additional part. Now looking at the main part, we're looking at first part you talk about economic growth, an increase in the production of goods and services by the economy, right? So what does the government do in order to ensure that we are having a well-established economy, they increase the production of goods and services by the economy. They can do that in a number of ways. They can do that by reducing the tax that the companies are paying. If the company's tax is reduced, then the production will increase because they will have extra money to buy inventory to produce more goods, right? So they can indirectly do that by either reducing the tax. If they're not going to be reducing the tax, there is other alternative ways that they can do, providing the subsidies to the small businesses who are growing up. It is measured in terms of increase in the real gross domestic product, right? So now how do we see that the economic growth is doing well? We do that in reference to the real gross domestic product. And how do we do that? It by looking at the spending of government as well as the spending of individuals living in the public. If that has increased during a certain period measured, then we can see that the economy did actually grow. It grew because when people are making more purchases, they are boosting the economy. How are they doing that? They're doing that by ensuring that the people that are selling the products or services are paying more tax to SARS. Real GDP is the value of goods produced in the country after the effects of inflation have been taken into account, right? So now you're talking about what is a real GDP. So real GDP, it is a value of goods produced in the country after the effects of the inflation have been taken into account. So you are taking out the inflation because you want to see what is the exact change in the GDP or the production. So you do not have to take into account inflation, as the inflation it will not show a real growth or real GDP growth. So you have to take it out in order to ensure that you get the real GDP. And then when you move down, for economic development to occur, the economic growth rate must be higher than the population growth rate, right? So if we want to ensure that the economy has been boosted, so the growth rate of the economy need to be higher than the population growth rate. So what does that mean? Each and every individual that is brought into this world, they need to consume certain service or products, right? So if that increase of population or number of people in the economy is less than the economic growth, right? It means that the economy is doing well, right? Because those increased number of or those additional people that have come into the economy are able to be serviced by the growth of the economy, and there will still be some portion that is left outside, right? So what are we expecting for the economic growth is that the economic growth is greater than the population growth or the how the economy is doing in terms of production of goods and services. It's better than the number of increase in people in the economy. A higher economic growth rate also means there will be fewer people who are dependent on the state to satisfy their basic need. So we're justifying what we already have spoke about. And then when you're looking down there, it says the state tries to ensure that there is continuous growth in the capacity because it leads to an improvement in the standard of living. So the state tries to ensure that there is a continuous growth in the capacity because it leads to improvement in the standard of living. So if there is an increase in economic growth, then the standard of living of people staying in the economy will also improve. So that's in the main part we're looking at what the objective of the public sector obviously is to boost the economy, and they can boost the economy by a number of ways. And how we know that they have done that is because there's an increase in the real GDP, there's an increase in the production of goods, and also the economic growth is greater than the population of people that the increase in population of people as well as the standard of living of people have improved in the economy. So now what is the other objective of the public sector? Is the full employment. Now let's just look at the full employment and see what the candidate should have covered when it comes to looking at the full employment in the main body of the essay. So what is then the full employment in relation to the objective of the public sector or the government institution? Attaining high level of employment is one of the most important economic objectives for all governments. So government want to ensure that everyone that lives in the economy is employed. And how does it help the government by ensuring that everyone that is living in the economy is employed? Number one, it means that people are going to be paying tax because they're employed, right? They will pay tax, and by paying tax, they are boosting the revenue that is collected by government. Number two, there will be fewer people depending on the unemployment grants as well as the child's grant or child support grants. Therefore, the excess money can be used for other services or infrastructure of the economy. So the objective or the biggest objective of the government is to ensure that there is a full employment or the employment rate is higher is possible. Full employment means that all persons who would like to work and who are looking for work should be able to find work or create work for themselves, right? So, what does that mean when we talk about full employment? It means that each and everyone who has a degree and is looking to have work, or even doesn't have a degree but is looking to find employment, is able in our economy to get a job. If that person is not able to get a job, the expectation is that that person is able to create the work themselves through entrepreneurial skill. So, what does that mean? They will be able to use their skills and expertise to ensure that they are able to find the work or to create the work for themselves. The unemployment rate increased over the past few years and above 30% after the COVID-19 pandemic. So we all know that the pandemic has created a lot of issues. So one of the main issues that the pandemic created is that some companies could not sustain themselves or were not able to ensure the continuous um, movement or they will continually survive after the COVID-19. I know that one of the best hotel that I went to in 2020, beginning of 2020, when I moved to Cape Town, unfortunately, that water closed down because they could not, or they were not able to survive during the COVID pandemic. So think of people that were employed by that hotel. That means they lost job, right? So we're not sure whether those people were able to get job post COVID-19 or after they were laid off. So the COVID-19 had an impact in terms of ensuring the full employment in the economy. So you need to talk about that to ensure the market that you know what are the issues that are coming about or that are affecting the full employment in the country. Formal sector activities must be promoted because it is an area where employment increases. So, the employment in South Africa is mainly increasing in the formal sector, and the government would like that it increase mainly in the formal sector. And the reason for that is because government directly benefit if the formal sector employment increase. Number one, because the employers in this formal sector they are paying tax. Number one, and number two, the other benefits that we know of is that those formal employer will be paying tax to SARS as opposed to informal sector. If you go and check nearby our area or nearby your area in the tax shop, which is informal sector, and ask them whether do they pay tax, the answer is most likely to be no. They do not pay VAT. They do not pay as you earn for the employees. So which means that government is not benefiting from their sales or rather from the employment of people nearby area. So that is not assisting government as well as the people that lives in South Africa. However, it might be helping those families that are employed as well as the business as such. Um, in the short run, the state accelerates employment creation through direct employment schemes, target subsidies, and expansionary macroeconomic packages. So, a government is obviously wanting that employment increase as much as possible, or they want to reduce the unemployment rate in South Africa. But that cannot only be done by the private sector, but the government also need to ensure that they are doing something to reduce the unemployment in South Africa. So what are they doing? They sometimes have the things that they're doing in the short run. For example, having subsidy, whereby they subsidize the small to medium companies to do certain products, and thereby those people they can those companies they can be able to hire people to work, and then by doing that they are reducing the unemployment. They can also do things like epwps, where people you see people that are working on the roads, they are under the scheme of epwp, and that is also assisting in ensuring that we are cutting down the unemployment in South Africa. So those are kind of things that the public sector is doing to enable the full employment in the country. Then looking down over the medium term, the state supports labor intensive objective in the agriculture and light manufacture sector. So what does it means that they are also trying to support labor intensive places like agriculture and the light manufacturing sector. Obviously, also in the form of subsidies and any other support could be they're reducing their taxes or they're not taxing them on some of their activities. And by doing so, it means that they are increasing the number of people are employed, because if they're not paying tax, then they're able to employ more people to come in with them. Over the long run, the employment is achieved. The state support knowledge intensive and capital intensive sectors to remain competitive. We know that the main aim of the government is to ensure the unemployment rate is reduced as low as possible, and that can be obtained in different number of ways. As I've already stated, they could be through subsidies, short-term employment, and also assisting those companies that are in different sectors to do well. That's by appointing specialists who be going in and assisting them to ensure for the better good of those. Now, the next part that we can look at in terms of the objective of the company, we look at the exchange rate stability, balance of payments, and balance of payment equilibrium. Now, let us see what the government will do to ensure that we are getting a stable exchange rate, and also we are improving the balance of payment, meaning to say we are in the surplus. Depreciation and appreciation of currency creates uncertainty to producers and traders and should therefore be limited. So, what does it mean? We all know that depreciation and appreciation of currency, it does have an effect in the economy, both positive and negative. So if the depreciation happens or is taking place in the economy, that does not mean that it is good for economy or it is bad for the economy. It can be good in other angles and bad in other angles. So when the depreciation of currency is good for the country, it is good because the producers who are using imported inventory or imported manufacturing in order to create their own products, they are able to buy it at a higher cost. So that's the problem, that buying is at higher cost. However, if we are exporting, our export will increase, and the reason export will increase, it is mainly on the fact that it will be cheaper for the foreigners to buy from us. Therefore, export will increase. However, import might be affected, it will decrease. It is opposite of what appreciation is. So you are expecting a difference when it comes to appreciation. If the rand appreciate, it means that we are importing more and exporting less. So if there's uncertainty in terms of currency, that means that we wouldn't know what will happen, whether we import will increase or decrease, or export will increase or decrease. So in order to ensure that we do not have issues of uncertainty, the best thing that the government would like to achieve is that our rand to dollar or any other exchange rate remain stable, so that we can predict what is expected to happen in future. Government uses its monetary and fiscal policy to ensure that the exchange rate remains relatively stable for as long as possible. So now what does it mean when you talk about monetary policies as well as fiscal policy? You know that when you're talking about monetary policy, we're talking about the interest rate. What does the government do to the interest rate to ensure the stability of the rand? And also when you're looking at the fiscal policy, we're looking at things that government can do on their side using the revenue they collected through sales collection in order to ensure that we are remaining stable. So government have ways that they can use through monetary policy as well as fiscal policy to ensure the exchange rate remain relatively stable for as long as possible. A balance of payment equilibrium influence the flow of goods, services, and capital in the country. So the equilibrium of the balance of payment, it is what controls the goods and services that are getting and leaving the country through the export as well as import. The exchange rate stability has strong impacts on the inflation rate and other macroeconomic variables. So when you're looking at the exchange rate, it determines the inflation of the country. And how does it do that? Because um, if the exchange rate depreciate or appreciate, it it shows how then the prices will look like. For example, let's talk about the depreciation of rand. If the rand decides to depreciate and you have or you consume goods that are coming outside the country to South Africa. So when you are buying them in South Africa, they will be higher. And the reason that they will be higher is because the producer or the business that is buying those goods, they need to pay extra money because of depreciation and rent. And in that way, they need to shift the additional money they've paid to you as a consumer in order to compensate for what they would have paid more. The choices and management of the exchange rate system forms a critical aspect of economic management to protect and encourage competitive macroeconomic stability and growth. So, in terms of how competitively we are on the world level, it is also determined through an exchange rate, right? So, we're gonna be more competitive if you are buying our inventory or if you are buying our raw material cheaper because you are able to charge the price that is acceptable by the buyers in the export market as well as even in the traditional or internal market. However, it is opposite if our rand appreciated means that we're going to have to charge more and then sell those products at a very higher price. Therefore, we're not going to be competitive in the both local or domestic market as well as outside market. More money inflows into the country results in surplus on the balance of payment accounts. We all know that if you are exporting more products outside the country, that means you're going to be receiving more money outside South Africa. So that means we are having Europe, we're having USA or Nigeria buying from us. We're going to receive more money from them because of more export that we're doing. It is opposite if we are importing, because if we're importing, it means that we are paying money that is leaving the account in South Africa to the foreign land, and in that way, it results to deficit. South African Reserve Bank changed the exchange rate from managed floating to a free floating rate, right? Promoting domestic production will increase the export, right? So the government is working tirelessly in order to ensure that we are sitting at the surplus in terms of the balance of payments, meaning to say we are exporting more than we are importing. And also they are working tirelessly to ensure that whatever that is implemented through monetary policy and fiscal policy, it is finding ourselves in the situation where the company is competitive at the world level compared to other companies. And the next part that we're going to be looking at it will be the price stability. So when we're looking or we're talking about price stability, what is the objective of the uh, of the of the public sector in order to ensure the price stability? What can they do? What is done to ensure the price stability? Now let us see. When you're looking at the price stability, market economies produce better results in terms of economic growth and employment when prices are relatively stable. So, why the economy will produce better results or will grow if the prices are stable? It is because if people they know how much they will buy the pack of juice today, and tomorrow they pay exactly the same price when they want the pack of juice. It means they will continuously come and buy from us because they can predict how much does our product cost. However, it is different if they do not know exactly how much are we going to be charging tomorrow. Is it going to be the same as yesterday or not? If the price kept on increasing, it gets to the point where we're pushing away the consumers of our products, and that will result to less sales that is made both on the local market as well as the foreign market. And if there's less sale that is made by the economy in the market, it therefore means the danger for the country's economy. So it means that the country economy will regress, or it will not do well in what the objective of the government is. In South Africa, relative price stability means that the inflation rate remained within the inflation target of 3.6%. So what does that mean? You know that we needed to think of what should be the relatively inflation rate that is expected. Is this 3 to 6%? Anything greater than that, it is not what the country is expecting. If we push the price of any consumables, for example, like electricity to above 6%, we are therefore going to say that is very expensive. So it is the price that the consumers aren't expecting to see an increase of above. So anything that is increasing by more than 6% is therefore not growing at a price that is considered stable in the country. So the government aims to ensure that any price increase or any price changes is in line with the range of 3.6% increase on an annual level. Interest rates based on the repo rate are the main instrument used to achieve price stability. So what do we mean by the interest rate as well as the repo rate? You'll hear in the news now and over again when the monetary policy sit, they will say that they are increasing the repo rate down by zero point 0.5 basis point or up by zero point 0.5 basis point or 100 basis point, 25 basis points, could be any basis points that they are doing. So if the repo rate increases, so what does it mean? It means that the interest rate or the lending rate of the country will also increase. So that is not a good thing for the country, because it means now that excess money that the prince or the people that are borrowing have to spend on other consumables or services, they are not able to do that because they need to service this single debt they have or this number of debt they have that are linked to the variable rate. So for that reason, it therefore means that it is not a good thing, or government is not striving to ensure that the repo rate is increased. However, even though the government might want to keep the repo rate at certain level, sometimes that is not achievable because monetary policy need to take action at some point in order to stabilize the recession or to stabilize any issues the country might be facing at different points. The benefits of the inflation target is a greater degree of transparency in monetary policy. All right. So now when you're talking about the inflation, you know, you always hear when they talk in the monetary policy that their decision is driven by the inflation, right? So they need to sit down and say this is our inflation target. So as soon as we get lower than the inflation target, therefore it means that the country is able to adjust on the monetary policy by reducing the interest rate as well as the repo rate, right? Then we're going to move to the last part. The inflation exceeded the upper limit of the range. The Reserve Bank must consider increasing interest rate to cool down the heated economy. So what does that mean? So now if you're sitting at a point where now we are greater than 3.6%, the monetary is we are greater than 3 to 6% range, the monetary policy will have no other choice but will have to increase the interest rate. And by increasing the interest rate, it is expected inflation will go down. So what does that mean to me? There's an assumption that if the prices go up, it's because many people are buying, many people have money. In order to ensure that you are cutting down on the availability of money that people have to buy services and goods, you need to increase the interest rate. Therefore, they will use that extra money to service the debts that are linked to the interest rate. So that's the way that our Reserve Bank works in order to monitor our interest rate and also that assist us in stabilizing the price. And the next part of our main body that we're going to look at is economic equity. So what is the objective of the government in line with economic equity. A restriction of income and wealth is essential in the market economy. A redistribution, rather, of income and wealth is essential in the market economies. So, how is that done? You see that we have number of tax that we have in South Africa, one of them being pay as you earn. So the pay as you earn, the main aim of the pay as you earn is to redistribute the income. So to ensure that the rich people are not far off away from people who are earning lower. So how is that done? It is done by ensuring that the tax of the rich people, it is sitting at a 45%, while that of the poor people is sitting at the lower margin. When I mean lower margin, it could be sitting at 18%, which is lower when compared to 45%. Also, we have taxes which we call the wealthy tax. Those are the taxes that are paid to the municipality for the houses. The higher the value of your house, the higher you are going to be paying for your house, and the lower the value of your house, you are going to be paying less tax. There are sections of society that earn large amount of money while others earn very little. Right. So you know that when it coming to the society, you're expecting people that are staying in Joburg that are paying more on tax because of them having more money as compared to Eastern Cape or other small towns like your Free State as well as Mpumalanga. Progressive income tax and tax on profit, wealthy, and expenditure are used to finance free social services. So that also goes to explain further the redistribution of income. It is done through progressive income tax, tax on profit, wealthy, and expenditure tax. So that is made to ensure that the extra money can be used to finance social services, which is your hospitals and your public schools. Basic education, primary health care, basic economic services, and cash grants to poor and other vulnerable people will enhance economic equity. So now you're stating more information about those free social services, which obviously financing basic education, primary health care, as well as other basic economic services. So this takes us to the end of the main part, and the main part we're talking about the objective of the public sector. Now we are going to move to the additional part. You know, when it's come to essay type question in economics, you have the basic part. I mean, you have the main part as well as the additional part. So we are now completely done with the main part, and the main part is made up of the maximum of 20 marks. So these are kind of topics we expected to address as a candidate when it comes to the main part. Now, let us summarize and look again what we've looked at. We look at economic growth. How can government ensure that economic growth is obtained, or what are the key indicators that shows that the economic growth is achieved in the economy? We look at the full employment. So how government ensure the full employment and how the full employment is attained in South Africa. We discussed that in details and also stated what are the issues of the things that is hindering the full employment in South Africa. We look at exchange rate stability and the balance of payments. Obviously, when we're talking about exchange rate stability, it is linked to balance of payment, because in balance of payment, we're looking at export and import, and the export and import is done through the different currencies in South Africa. We look at the price stability. How do we achieve a price stability of 3.6%? And we spoke in details in terms of what does the monetary policy do, or the monetary uh, take things or account for things in order to ensure that we are reaching the price stability in the country. We look at economic equity. So, in the economic equity, we spoke about the social services. How are those social services coming about? That is to fund basic education, primary health care, as well as the other basic economic activity. It is done through the progressive income tax, wealth tax, and expenditure. And we look in details in terms of the redistribution of income, why it is important in the economy, and what is the effect of that redistribution of income. Now we're done. We're going to additional part. What is in the additional part? So the additional part, the question was the public sector failure impact. how does it negatively impact our economic stability? So if you look down now, we're looking at the negativity, right? So it is very important to take note of what you're going to discuss on the negativity. So the information that you've addressed in the main parts now will come handy here when you are explaining the negative effect of the public sector failure, causing price stability, which depress consumer spending. So, if the consumer spending is depressed because of the inflation, that it will negatively affect the economy, causing policy uncertainty, which may reduce investors' confidence. If there is no certainty in terms of fiscal policy and monetary policy in South Africa, that will take the investors away from the country because they will not be sure what is happening in the country next after the set different period. Increasing unemployment as economy failed to create new jobs opportunity. Again, so if the unemployment rate in South Africa is going up, it means that the economy will fail. And the reason for that is because there will be fewer employment, fewer production, fewer tax paid over to SARS, and the people will not have money to pay from the shop, discouraging exports are due to exchange rate stability. So, what are we looking at here? People that are exporting to other countries might not be able to do that because of the price stability that is too high, reducing the volume of exports, which may increase the balance of payments. So, if you're reducing the value of export, we will be gaining or receiving less money in South Africa. If we are gaining or receiving less money in South Africa, what does that mean to me and you? Getting less money, it means that we are moving to the BOP deficit because we'll be then potentially buying more from this other country. Expose the economy to recession due to lack of real GDP growth. So what does that mean? It means the population is growing faster than the production that is or economic production that is happening in the country. Therefore, then we are finding ourselves in the recession because the GDP is growing lower than it is expected, or the production in the country is growing lower than is expected due to the increase in unemployment and increase in the prices, or the inflation has went up excessively. Increasing the fiscal burden due to the wastage of resources, especially by parastatals. Decreasing production of goods and services as parastyle state-owned enterprises fail to supply key input services, e.g., energy and transport. So the other issue is when Eskom, for example, fails to provide steady electricity, that means we have more load shedding piling up in the country. That also has an effect, or that is what we call a public sector failure. Increasing the cost of doing business in the economy as a result of inefficiencies. So there are a number of efficiencies that can cause the business failures. One being high unemployment, meaning people are they are not able to employ people to produce goods. People aren't able to buy their goods because they're not working, they're unemployed. On the other side, the issues of getting either water as well as the energy they need for their production. So that is the cause of the public sector failure, or the impact that this may have. And please take note, candidates, if the public sector is unable to deliver what is needed by the customer, that has an effect on its own. And how does that have an effect? Because there'll be less money collected by the receiver of revenue, and if there's less money collected by the receiver of revenue, that has an influence in our country in overall. Now, how one is expected to conclude? In your conclusion, you're expected to only state one point where you are concluding on the things that you've already discussed. Again, candidate, do not go above 1 point because you do not have to try and express the examiner, because the marker will only mark the points, first point that you have addressed. The rest of the points will be waste of your time. So how then you conclude? You're going to say the state plays a significant role in achieving the macroeconomics objective by guiding the economy through national budgets. So what are you saying? That you're saying national budgets, that you hear it tabled every February of each year, it does help the economy because they can be able to split the money received, expected to the received, and how that money is going to the spending economy, which is very, very important for the country at large. That takes us to the end of this essay type question. Thank you so much for following me up on this far. Please follow me and subscribe to my YouTube channel as well as TikTok for more videos of similar nature. And bye bye.